I want to start with something that still makes me laugh when I think about it. Not because it's funny anymore, but because it was genuinely funny, completely funny, and I think that's the part that makes the whole thing so hard to explain to people who weren't there. You know how some friendships just work? Not in a dramatic soulmate kind of way. Just in a quiet, reliable, Tuesday afternoon kind of way. The kind of friend who texts you a photo of something stupid in a grocery store aisle and you laugh for 10 minutes without either of you saying a single word. The kind of friend whose voice you can hear before she even finishes a sentence. That was Renee Mallory. And for 20 years, I would have bet everything I owned on her. I mean that literally. As it turns out, my name is Joanna Briggs. I am 51 years old. I live in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, in a house I have owned for 14 years, on a street where the maple trees are so old and wide they form a tunnel over the road in summer that makes you feel, for just a moment, like you're driving through something sacred. I am a licensed occupational therapist. I have worked at the same rehabilitation center on Claremont Avenue for 16 years. I drive a reliable Jeep. I keep a garden in the backyard that is more ambitious than my schedule allows, which means it is always slightly out of control in a way I have made peace with. My ex-husband, Todd, and I divorced 11 years ago. Amicable. No children. We still wave to each other when we see each other at the farmer's market on Saturdays, which happens more often than you would expect in a city of 70,000 people. I tell you all of this because I want you to understand who I was before this story happened. I was a steady, practical, moderately happy woman with a good job and a full life and one best friend she had known since the second week of college. Renee Mallory. We met at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire in the fall of 1998. She was in my introduction to psychology class, sitting 2 rows in front of me, wearing a yellow jacket that was slightly too big for her and eating a granola bar during the lecture with absolutely zero shame. The professor paused and looked at her. She looked back at him. She kept chewing. I laughed out loud. She turned around, found my face in the crowd, and grinned like we had already known each other for years. That was it. That was the whole beginning. We were roommates by sophomore year. We were in each other's weddings. She was my maid of honor. I was hers, though both marriages eventually ended, which we also laughed about. We had a standing Thursday dinner that lasted for nearly a decade until she moved to Madison for work, and we switched to phone calls that sometimes ran so long my ear would go numb. She was funny in a way that was almost mean but never quite crossed the line. She remembered everything about your coffee order, the name of your childhood dog, the specific thing your mother said to you at 17 that still made you flinch. She was the kind of woman who made everyone around her feel chosen. I understand now exactly how useful that quality was to her. But I am getting ahead of myself. Renee worked in financial consulting. She had built a client base in Madison over about 8 years, small business owners, young professionals, a few retirees looking to grow modest savings. She was good at it, or seemed to be. She drove a nice car. She had a condo near Lake Monona, with a view that made you catch your breath the first time you saw it. She took 2 vacations a year, always somewhere with good food and warm water. I never thought much about any of it. Why would I? She worked hard. She was smart. She had built something, same as me. The first moment, the very first one, looking back where something might have registered as slightly off, was a Thursday call in the spring of 2023. We were talking about nothing in particular. Weekend plans. A television show we were both watching. And then she mentioned, almost as an aside, that she had a new client she was particularly excited about. A woman in Eau Claire, she said. Someone who had recently come into a significant inheritance and was looking for guidance on growing it. In Eau Claire? I said. Do I know her? A small pause. So small, I barely registered it. I doubt it, Renee said. She's pretty private. We moved on. I forgot about it within the hour. I have thought about that pause approximately 400 times since then. The call that changed everything came 14 months later. July. A Thursday evening, our Thursday, except Renee hadn't called, which was unusual. I texted twice. No response. I told myself she was busy. I made dinner. I watched television. At 8:47 p.m. my phone rang. Not Renee. A woman named Patricia Holt. I did not know anyone named Patricia Holt. I almost didn't answer. Is this Joanna Briggs? She said when I picked up. Her voice was controlled in the way that voices get when a person is working very hard to hold something together. It is, I said. Can I help you? I think so, she said. I hope so. A breath. My name is Patricia Holt. I'm a client of Renee Mallory's financial consulting firm. A pause. She listed you as her business partner. The room went very quiet. Not the room. Me. I went very quiet. I'm sorry, I said carefully. She listed me as what? Her business partner, Patricia said. Briggs and Mallory Financial Consulting. Your name is on the contract I signed, Ms. Briggs. Your name is on every document I have. I sat down. I was already sitting. I sat down harder. How much money? I said slowly. Did you give her? Patricia Holt was quiet for a moment that lasted a very long time. $84,000, she said. Over 18 months. I put my hand flat on the kitchen table in front of me. Just pressed it there. Like I needed to feel something solid. Patricia, I said. I have never met Renee Mallory's clients. I have never been her business partner. I have never heard your name before tonight. I paused. And I am so sorry to tell you this, but I do not think you are the only one. She started to cry. I sat at my kitchen table in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, in the middle of a warm July evening, with the garden slightly out of control outside my window and the maple trees making their tunnel over the road, and I listened to a stranger cry. And somewhere underneath the shock and the fury and the cold, specific grief of realizing that my best friend of 20 years had built a lie with my name on it. Somewhere underneath all of that, one thought rose to the surface and stayed there. How long has she been doing this? I didn't sleep that night. Not even close. I lay in my bed in the dark and stared at the ceiling and did something I had never done before in 51 years of knowing Renee Mallory. I went back through everything. Every memory. Every conversation. Every moment I had filed under "That's just Renee" and moved on without a second thought. And what I found when I actually looked was a trail I should have seen years ago. The way she always changed the subject when I asked specific questions about her work. The clients she mentioned and then never mentioned again. The money, always just there, never quite explained, never quite adding up when I actually stopped to do the math. The new car every 2 years. The condo. The vacations. The way she had, over the past 3 or 4 years, slowly stopped asking about my life and started redirecting every conversation back to herself. She had been managing me, I realized, the same way she managed them. I got up at 4 a.m. and made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table with my phone and I searched for Briggs and Mallory Financial Consulting. It existed. A real website. Professional. Clean design. A logo that looked like something a legitimate firm would use. 2 names listed as founding partners, Renee Mallory and Joanna Briggs. My name. My actual full name, next to a headshot that was not me but close enough in age and general description that someone who had never met me might not look twice. A fake version of me, built by my best friend, sitting on the internet for anyone to find. I put my coffee down. My hands were shaking. Not from anger. Not yet. That came later. Right now it was something colder, the specific physical sensation of realizing that the ground beneath a relationship you built your adult life on was never solid. That you were standing on something constructed entirely from performance. I picked up my phone and called Renee. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted, "Call me. Now. It's urgent." 3 dots appeared. Then it disappeared. Then it appeared again. Then nothing. She knew. By 6 a.m. I had made a decision. I was not going to panic. I was not going to drive to Madison and pound on her door. I was not going to send the kind of message that could be screenshot and used against me later. I was going to find out exactly how deep this went before I moved a single inch. I called in to work. First sick day I had taken in 14 months. My supervisor, a kind woman named Deborah, told me to rest and not worry about anything. I thanked her and hung up and immediately opened my laptop. I spent the next 11 hours doing nothing but research. Here is what I found. Briggs and Mallory Financial Consulting had been incorporated in Wisconsin as an LLC. The registration date was 4 years and 3 months ago. My name was listed as a co-owner on the filing. My real name, my real date of birth, my real address at the time, the previous house I had owned on the other side of Eau Claire before I moved 4 years ago. She had incorporated a fake business using my personal information in the state of Wisconsin. Without my knowledge, without my consent. That was identity theft, not a misunderstanding, not a gray area, a crime. I wrote that word down on a notepad and underlined it twice. The website listed a business address in Madison, a suite number I recognized from research I had done on Daniel Fry just months before with Becca. A mail forwarding service. The same trick. Different criminals. Same playbook. How many people are out there doing exactly this? I pushed the thought aside. Focus. I found 2 reviews of Briggs and Mallory Financial Consulting on a business directory site. Both positive. Both recently. Both from names I didn't recognize. I wrote them down. I found a LinkedIn page for the firm. Again, professional, polished. My name listed as co-founder with a biography that was almost entirely fabricated. It said I had 15 years of experience in financial planning. It listed credentials I did not have. It said I was based in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which was the one true thing on the entire page and which was almost certainly the point. A local name. A local address. Someone her Madison clients could theoretically verify existed. Renee had chosen me specifically. She had built the lie around me specifically. Because who would doubt Joanna Briggs? Steady, practical, 16 years at the same job, Joanna Briggs. If a client ever looked me up, they would find exactly what Renee needed them to find. A real person. A stable person. Someone with roots. She had used my steadiness as a weapon. I sat back in my chair and felt something shift inside me that I don't have a clean word for. Not anger. Not grief. Something that was both of those things, and also something harder underneath them. Something that had edges. I picked up my phone and called Patricia Holt back. Patricia answered on the first ring. She had not slept either. I could hear it. I told her what I had found. I told her slowly and clearly, and without any of the emotion that was pressing against the inside of my chest like water behind a dam. I told her that my name had been used without my knowledge, that I was not and had never been Renee's business partner, that I intended to pursue every available legal option. Then I asked her the question I had been building toward all morning. Patricia, did Renee ever mention other clients? Anyone she referenced by name, or any situation that sounded similar to yours? A long pause. There was a woman, Patricia said slowly. She mentioned her once, maybe 6 months ago. Said she was helping her grow an inheritance. I remember thinking it was similar to my situation. Another pause. Her name was Gwen. I don't know her last name.
Gwen.
I wrote it down. Anyone else? There was a man, Patricia said. Retired. She talked about him like he was a success story. Said he had tripled his initial investment. Her voice tightened. I think that was what convinced me to give her more. Of course it was. That was the move. The fake success story. The proof of concept designed to loosen the next person's grip on their savings. Patricia, I said, I need you to write down everything you remember. Every conversation. Every document. Every wire transfer. Keep it somewhere safe. I paused. And I need you to be prepared to talk to an attorney. Silence. Then, I've already called one, she said quietly. This morning. For the first time since 8:47 the previous evening, something in my chest loosened slightly. Good, I said. We're going to need each other. I found Gwen by the end of the week. Her full name was Gwen Callahan. She was 63 years old, a retired nurse from Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, a small city east of Madison. She had lost $41,000 over 14 months to Briggs and Mallory Financial Consulting. She had a folder of documents she had been too ashamed to show anyone. Ashamed. That word hit me somewhere specific and deep. She thought it was her fault for trusting. Renee had made her feel that way, made her feel naive for being deceived, rather than criminal for doing the deceiving. I recognized the mechanism immediately. It was exactly what Renee had always done, quietly, in small ways, throughout our friendship. Made you feel slightly foolish for not seeing things her way. Made you doubt your own reading of the room. I had spent 20 years mistaking that quality for intelligence. I called Gwen on a Tuesday evening. We talked for 2 hours. By the end of it, she was crying, and I was not. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I had made a decision somewhere in the previous 4 days that I was going to save the falling apart for after. The attorney I found was named Robert Vance. He practiced out of Madison, and came recommended by Patricia Holt's attorney, which meant he already had half the picture before I walked into his office on a Thursday morning in early August. He was in his mid-50s, unhurried, with the particular stillness of someone who has heard extraordinary things for a long time and stopped being surprised by them. I laid everything on his desk. The website, the LLC filing, the LinkedIn page, the fabricated biography, Patricia's documents, Gwen's documents, 20 years of friendship with the woman who had built it all. Robert Vance looked at the LLC incorporation filing for a long time. She used your date of birth, he said. Yes. Your previous home address. Yes. Without your knowledge or consent. I found out 6 days ago. He set the paper down. Look at me. Ms. Briggs, he said. What you're describing is identity theft, wire fraud, and fraudulent misrepresentation at minimum. Depending on how the money moved and whether any of it crossed state lines, there may be federal exposure as well. He paused. How many victims do you know of? 2 confirmed, I said. I believe there are more. There are almost always more, he said simply. He pulled a legal pad toward him. Here's what we're going to do. What Robert Vance did over the following 3 weeks was systematic and quiet and absolutely devastating to Renee Mallory's carefully constructed world. He filed a criminal complaint with the Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions. He contacted the Wisconsin Department of Justice Consumer Protection Division. He referred the identity theft component to the Madison field office of the FBI, given the interstate elements of the wire transfers. And then the move that I had specifically requested, the one Robert had initially pushed back on before I explained my reasoning, he sent a formal legal notice to every major financial directory and business registration database that had Briggs and Mallory Financial Consulting listed. Every single one. Takedown requests. Fraud notifications. Cease and desist filings. Within 10 days, the website was dark. The LinkedIn page was suspended. The business directory listings carried fraud warnings. Renee's entire constructed world, the one she had spent 4 years building with my name as its foundation, began collapsing from the outside in. And she still hadn't returned a single one of my calls. The silence from Renee was its own kind of answer. She knew I knew. She had known since the night Patricia called me. And rather than reach out, rather than try to explain, to apologize, to construct whatever story she would have constructed, she had gone quiet. That told me everything about how well she actually knew me. She thought silence was protection. She thought if she didn't engage, I would have nothing to push against. She thought she could wait for me out the way she had always waited out uncomfortable things with patience and charm and the confidence of someone who had never truly been held accountable for anything. She did not know what I had become in those 3 weeks. The woman who had sat at this kitchen table in July with shaking hands was still here. But something had grown up around her. Something deliberate, organized, immovable. I found 2 more victims in the last week of August. A retired teacher from Janesville named Donna Price. $58,000. 3 years of monthly investment updates that were entirely fabricated. And a 34-year-old woman named Alicia Marsh from Middleton, who had given Renee her entire inheritance from her late mother. $62,000. She had thought she was securing her future. She was working 2 jobs now to stay in her apartment. When Alicia told me that, something inside me went completely still. Not the stillness of shock this time. The stillness of absolute certainty. I called Robert Vance. How soon? I asked. The DA's office in Dane County received our referral yesterday, he said. Based on what we've submitted for victims, documented wire transfers, the identity theft component, I expect movement within the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I had waited 20 years to find out who Renee Mallory actually was. I could wait 2 more weeks. The last night of August, I sat in my garden in the dark. The plants were overgrown and slightly wild the way they always got by late summer. The maple trees were still, and the air smelled like the end of something, that particular Wisconsin late summer smell that means the warmth is almost done, that something is about to change. I thought about the girl in the yellow jacket eating a granola bar in Introduction to Psychology. I thought about 20 years of Thursday phone calls. I thought about Alicia Marsh working 2 jobs to pay rent with the money her mother left her gone, handed to a woman who had looked her in the eye and performed trustworthiness like it was the most natural thing in the world. Renee had never been my best friend. She had been my longest audition, and I had given her a perfect performance for 2 decades without ever knowing I was on stage. I stood up, went inside. I washed my hands at the kitchen sink. 2 weeks, I thought. And then it's her turn. The call came on a Wednesday morning, September, early enough that the air outside still had that cool, thin quality that arrives in Wisconsin like a warning. Summer is generous right up until the moment it simply stops. Robert Vance. 8:22 a.m. I was already awake. I had been awake since 5. The Dane County District Attorney's Office is moving forward, he said. They've been building independently since our referral. They have banking records we didn't have access to. Wire transfer documentation going back further than we knew. A pause. Joanna, there are more victims than we identified. I sat very still. How many more? At least 9 total. Possibly 11. The DA's office is still working through the financial records. Another pause. The total amount across all victims is somewhere in the range of $600,000. $600,000. I had spent the last 6 weeks thinking I understood the scope of what Renee had done. I had found 4 women. I had built a case around 4 women. I had told myself I had found the edges of it. There were no edges. When? I asked. Today, Robert said. This morning. I wanted you to hear it from me first. I don't know what I expected to feel at that moment. Satisfaction, maybe. The clean, uncomplicated relief of a thing finally happening that should have happened weeks ago. What I actually felt was more complicated than that. There was relief, yes. But underneath it was something that took me a long time to name. A sadness that had nothing to do with Renee and everything to do with the 20-year friendship I had believed in completely. The one that had never existed. The one I had loved anyway. You can grieve a lie, I realized. The grief is real even when the thing you're grieving wasn't. I made my coffee. I stood at my kitchen window. I watched the birds at the feeder, 3 chickadees, a nuthatch moving headfirst down the trunk of the maple tree the way nuthatches always do, defying what seems like the logical direction of things. At 9:15 my phone buzzed with a news alert from the Wisconsin State Journal. Madison woman arrested on multiple counts of wire fraud and identity theft in financial scheme targeting retirees and professionals. Below the headline was a photograph. Renee Mallory, 50 years old, dark hair, shorter than I remembered from the last time I'd seen her in person. The photograph was from her LinkedIn profile, the real one, the personal one, and in it she was smiling the smile I had known for 20 years. The warm one. The one that made you feel chosen. I looked at that smile for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and finished my coffee. Here is what the DA's office had built while Robert Vance and I were building our own case in parallel. Renee had opened the Briggs and Mallory LLC 4 years and 3 months ago, but the scheme itself had begun 2 years before that, under a different business name that she had dissolved before I ever found out. A company called Mallory Wealth Partners, also registered in Wisconsin, also fraudulent, also gone by the time anyone thought to look for it. She had been doing this for 6 years. 6 years of fake investment agreements. Fake monthly statements showing fictional returns on fictional portfolios. Fake success stories told to new clients to loosen their grip on their savings. Real money moved through real bank accounts into a structure designed to make it nearly impossible to trace quickly. The DA had traced it. All of it. 11 victims. Ages ranging from 34 to 71. A retired school principal from Fitchburg who had lost his entire retirement supplement, $88,000. A young couple in Middleton who had handed over the down payment they had saved for 3 years for their first house. a 71-year-old widow from Sun Prairie named Margaret who had given Renee $60,000 that her late husband had spent 40 years saving. Margaret had told investigators she trusted Renee because she reminded her of her daughter. When Robert Vance told me that detail, I had to set the phone down for a moment. Not because it surprised me. Because it didn't. Because that was exactly how Renee operated. She found the thing you needed her to be, and she became it with such ease and such apparent warmth that the performance never once looked like a performance. She had done it to Margaret. She had done it to Alicia Marsh. She had done it to Patricia Holt and Gwen Callahan and 7 other people whose names I was only now learning. And she had done it to me for 20 years. The difference was that I had given her something more valuable than money. I had given her my name. The charges came down in full the following week. 9 counts of wire fraud. 4 counts of fraudulent misrepresentation. 2 counts of identity theft, both under my name, specifically because the DA's office determined that the Briggs and Mallory entity had been used to defraud clients in 2 separate jurisdictions, which elevated the identity theft charge. My name, used twice, in 2 separate crimes, in 2 different counties. Robert Vance explained the charges to me on a Thursday morning in his Madison office. Our Thursday, I thought, and then I pushed the thought away, and when he finished, I asked the question I had been holding since September. Is there any possibility of restitution for the victims? Robert nodded slowly. The DA's office has already filed for an asset freeze, he said. Her personal accounts, the LLC accounts, everything connected to the business entity. There's a property in Madison, the Lake Monona condo, that is currently being assessed. He paused. She has been spending, but she has not been spending everything. There is money to recover. I won't tell you the victims will be made entirely whole, because I don't know that yet. But they will recover something. Something. It wasn't everything. It was never going to be everything. You cannot give Margaret back the feeling of safety her late husband spent 40 years building. You cannot give Alicia Marsh back the feeling of her mother's final gift, handed intact to the future Alicia was supposed to have. But something was real. Something was movement. Something was the system doing, slowly and imperfectly, what it was supposed to do. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 2 months. Renee reached out on a Friday. Not to call. Not to come to my door the way Tessa Barnett had come to mine. Honest and frightened, and holding the truth in both hands. Renee sent a text message. The first communication she had initiated since the night Patricia Holt called me, and the whole architecture came down. It said, "Joe, I know you won't want to hear from me, but I need you to know that I never wanted you to be hurt by this. You were never supposed to be involved. I'm sorry." I read it 3 times. You were never supposed to be involved. I won't explain why that sentence was the one that finally broke something open in me, not in a destructive way, but in the way that things break open when they have been sealed too long. The pressure releasing. She still didn't understand. After everything. After 6 years of fraud. After 11 victims. After Margaret and Alicia and the young couple's down payment and 40 years of a dead man's savings. After she had taken my name and my identity and my reputation and built a criminal enterprise on top of them without asking, without telling, without a single moment of hesitation. She thought the problem was that I had gotten involved. She thought the apology she owed me was for the inconvenience. She had never seen me as a person, I realized. I was always just a resource, the most useful one she had. I put my phone down. I did not respond. I have not responded. The preliminary hearing was held in Dane County Circuit Court in October. I sat in the gallery, with Patricia Holt on my left and Gwen Callahan on my right. Alicia Marsh sat directly behind me. Donna Price, the retired teacher from Janesville, sat beside her. We had not planned to sit together. We arrived separately and found each other instinctively, the way people do when they have been through the same thing and their bodies recognize each other before their minds catch up. Renee entered with her attorney, a good one, expensive, the kind of attorney that a person retains when they have been hiding money carefully enough that some of it is still hidden. She was dressed conservatively. Her hair was different. She looked smaller than I remembered, which I knew was partly my perception shifting and partly something else, the specific shrinking that happens to people when the performance finally drops, and what's underneath is just a person who made choices. She did not look at me when she walked in. Not once. I had spent 2 months imagining this moment. I had imagined what it would feel like to be in the same room with her after everything. I thought I would feel rage. I thought I would feel the volcanic, specific fury of someone who had been comprehensively betrayed by someone they loved. What I actually felt was quieter than that. Distance. A vast, clean distance between who she was and who I was. A distance I hadn't been able to feel when I was standing inside the friendship, too close to see its shape clearly. From here, I could see it perfectly, and it was nothing like what I had thought it was. The plea negotiations lasted 3 weeks. In the end, Renee Mallory pleaded guilty to 6 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of identity theft. The agreement included full cooperation with the restitution process. Every asset connected to the scheme, the condo, the investment accounts, the LLC holdings, turned over for distribution to the victims. Her sentencing hearing is scheduled for January. Robert Vance told me she is facing between 4 and 7 years in federal prison, depending on the judge's discretion and the full weight of the restitution assessment. 4 to 7 years. I sat with that number in the quiet of my kitchen on the evening Robert called to tell me, and I tried to feel something clean and simple about it. Something that felt like justice completing a full circle. What I felt instead was the specific complexity of a person who has loved someone for a long time and then discovered that the love was the only real thing in the relationship. The love was real. The person I loved was not. That is a grief with no clean resolution. You do not get to know it. You carry it and eventually it becomes lighter, but it does not disappear. I called Alicia Marsh that evening. She had gotten the news about the plea the same way I had from her own attorney, who had been coordinating with Robert throughout the process. When she answered the phone, her voice was thick, the way voices get when someone has been crying and is trying to hold it together for a conversation. "Are you okay?" I asked. A pause. "I keep thinking about my mom," she said. "She saved that money for so long. She was so careful with it." A breath. "I just keep thinking she trusted people. That was the thing she taught me. Trust people, Alicia. People are mostly good." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Your mother wasn't wrong," I said carefully. "Most people are. Renee is the exception. She just happened to be a very well-placed one." Alicia was quiet. "Will you feel better when she's sentenced?" she asked. I thought about it honestly. Not the answer that sounded right. The true one. "I think I'll feel different," I said. "I don't know if better is the word. I think the better part has already happened. That part was us. The 4 of us found each other. You called me back when I called you. Patricia knocked on my door at 8:47 at night because she had nowhere else to go." I paused. "That's the part I'll keep." Alicia was quiet for a long moment. "Yeah," she said finally softly. "Yeah. Okay. It is November now. The maple trees on my street have let everything go, all the gold and orange and red, all of it down, the branches bare and clean against the sky, the particular shade of gray that Wisconsin does better than anywhere I have ever been. There is something almost restful about it. The trees are not performing, just standing there in what they actually are. I went back to work. I went back to my patients at the rehabilitation center, the people relearning how to do the things that injury or illness had taken from them. How to hold a pen, how to button a shirt, how to trust their own hands again. I am good at that work. I have always been good at that work. I understand it better now than I did before. Patricia Holt sends me a text every Sunday morning. Nothing elaborate, just a check-in. A photo of her garden or her dog or something she found funny at the grocery store. The kind of text that means I am here, and so are you, and that matters. We are building something, slowly, from the wreckage of what Renee left behind. Something that is entirely ours. Something no one handed us, and no one can take. I have not made a new best friend. I don't think that's what this is, or what it needs to be. I think what it is, what Patricia and Gwen and Alicia and Donna and I are to each other, is witnesses. People who know exactly what happened and refuse to let it be the only story. I still have Renee's last text message on my phone. "You were never supposed to be involved. I have thought about deleting it. I haven't yet. Not because I need it. Not because I am holding on to something, but because sometimes on the mornings when I stand in my kitchen window with my coffee and watch the birds at the feeder, I look at it and I feel the distance again, that vast, clean, clarifying distance, and I remember exactly who I am. Joanna Briggs. I am 51 years old. Eau Claire, Wisconsin. A woman who was used by someone she trusted completely. A woman who found out, who built a case, who found 11 strangers and helped make sure none of them had to stand in it alone. A woman who is still here, still steady, steadier, actually, than she has ever been in her life. If this story hit you somewhere real, drop a comment below. Which moment broke you the most? And what would you have done the night Patricia Holt called? Story 3 is coming. And trust me, you are not ready for it.